Our next speaker is a man who everyone in this room owes a great debt of gratitude. Starting on the road to terrorism, death, and destruction, he chose life. He sought the truth, and when he discovered it, he risked his life for 10 years to protect countless Israeli lives. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to be able to introduce you today to Mosab Hassan Youssef, better known by Israel's security services as the Green Prince. But before he comes on stage, please watch with me the following film.
This is my chance to be a hero for the sake of the nation. But Allah had other plans for me. Had the right to make the other side feel our pain.
An art, a very difficult art. You need to make him betray his own people.
He asked me, would you work for us? To collaborate with Israel is the most shameful thing.
The first day handling him was the first day of the end of my career. We called him the Green Prince.
My father was the top Hamas leader in the West Bank.
He had no clue what I was doing.
It's like recruiting the son of the Israeli Prime Minister.
Deep in my heart, I was really terrified. You're a target, and you can get killed anytime. I was on my own.
He was in a real trouble.
I start to realize that people are dying because of this lie.
This is a big game.
No one else knows about you. You will start to lose your sense of reality.
He's not just a source. He was there for us all the time.
That kind of bond is impossible to break.
Qaeda immediately issued a death sentence for him.
Go underground, don't come back, ever.
I am not who you think I am.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Green Prince.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I am not what you think I am. There is truth to that. But this is like everyday truth, everyday reality. Last time I spoke here, I had a very good joke. This time, unfortunately, I haven't been able to top that joke. So there is no joke. Please forgive me. Instead, I'd like to quote a politician. Usually I don't quote politicians, but Golda Meir said something regarding to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. When Arabs love their children more than they hate the Jews or Israel, there is a chance for peace. And this is true. The problem with the Arabs and Palestinians, that they are so blinded with hatred that they cannot give priority to their own children. This is a fundamental problem. Before we talk about politics, before we talk about ideologies, deals, the deal of the century, who cares? Let's look at the fundamental things. You know, when Hamas choose in Gaza Strip to use children as human shields, there is nothing left to say. Even Israel asked civilians to evacuate, and Hamas forced them to stay. Children are the least of the Palestinian leadership's concern, with no exception, by the way. I'm not talking only about Hamas. Also, I'm talking about the Palestinian Authority, the PLO. This is their method. They have used children and the suffering of children to profit. they're basically parasites. They feed of children and innocent people's sufferings. Without conflict, they don't exist. See it from this dimension. Who are they? If there was no Palestinian conflict, who cares about Mahmoud Abbas? He's nobody. But when there is conflict, he gets prestige. He becomes significant on a global level. His game is not local, it's global. Then what do they fight for? They fight for money. That's the root cause of all evil in the Middle East. The most corrupted revolution, if it's actually qualifies as a revolution. 70 years of profiting out of this state, conflict state. And the United States just recently came to realize that money is not helping the situation. Billions of dollars has been given to the Palestinian Authority. It did not reach the children, it did not build infrastructure, it did not build economy. They stole the money and they kept people in darkness. And whenever they feel that they're running out of money, they send a bunch of children to die on the fence, on the border. Mafia, political mafia, criminals. No, at the United Nations, for those who saw the speech, I said to the Palestinian delegation that you are the greatest enemy of the Palestinian people, and I really meant it, because they are. If they truly care for the children, and I choose today to make children, the core of my speech, because I don't have much left to say regarding to this disgusting situation and ugly reality. So maybe the children can bring sight to us, I speak on the authority of the child within that was asking many questions. Why were we suffering? And they told us Israel is the problem, it's the occupation. And we believed, and we went on hating Israel. But the truth is, Israel is not the problem of the Palestinian people. And in fact, if Palestinian leaders care for the children, they would drop their entire political and religious ambitions, vomit it. Because children, like a teardrop of a child, is superior to all their religious and political ambitions combined. But Palestinian leaderships, with no exception, Hamas, Fatah, and other factions, ugly names, are blinded by lust for power. This is what blinds them. Of course, they wear the mask of nationalism, that we are fighting for liberation. Liberation from what? Palestinian state. Palestinian state was a possibility 70 years ago. But Arabians and Palestinians choose not to coexist with the newborn state of Israel. Instead of focusing on building a Palestinian state side by side with Israel, they choose to war with Israel. They choose to destroy Israel. Then, can you imagine 300 million Arabians supported the armies of Arabian countries to go destroy the minority Jews in that region. And somehow a miracle happened and they lost the war. And for those who lost the war, they don't get to decide the terms of negotiations. End of the story. It was possible to negotiate 70 years ago. Sit down like human beings and negotiate. But now the reality on the ground is different because they lost the Golan Heights, they lost the West Bank, they lost Sinai. Sadat was a sane man, the only sane Arabian leader, who came to Israel and said, let's figure this out. And they got Sinai back. Now, 60 years later, those guys come and talk about another state in a very small country. They know that's impossibility. And I know that the children of Gaza and the children of the West Bank don't need a state. We have 22 Arab states I'm not so proud of. Why add another one? We have enough garbage in the Middle East, And yes, I can say this. So practically, Palestinian people don't need a state. They need economy. They need somebody to organize their daily life. They need a mayor, the mayor of Ramallah, not King Mahmoud Abbas. He wants to be a king. Ramallah is too small for him, Arsonists who create the fire, then play the firefighter who wants to be credited for addressing it. Bullshit, Excuse my street language. I spend lots of time in the streets, this is why. The other day I got an invitation from the Israeli embassy for like a high-profile dinner. Unfortunately, I'm leaving the country, but I told somebody, well, nowadays I really prefer to hang out with some low-profile people. But what can I do? It's like I'm caught up in this Middle Eastern nonsense, really, really ugly reality. And my point of view is not political. Nobody told me what to say today. I'm just speaking my heart, and enough is enough. How long can we stretch the lie? The Jewish people have suffered enough. Okay, and anyone, what are you clapping for? They have suffered enough. And they have shown humanity a great example of survival. The establishment of the State of Israel was never against any people, not the Palestinian people, not the Jordanians, not the Saudi Arabians. It was just creating a home for the Jewish people. It's a legitimate thing. It's a beautiful thing. And the bloodshed that is happening in that region is because of the Arabian arrogance, the Arabian ego that need to be deflated, truly. And there is no other way to say it. I try to be nice, and turn the other cheek, all the Christian values that I like. But in this reality, it's like you might have to punch somebody in the face, So, anti-Semitism and Nazism, they have something in common, which is basically blaming the Jews. Blaming the Jews for the suffering of the Palestinian people. Blaming the Jews of the suffering of humanity. Blaming the Jews for the financial crisis. Blaming and blaming. First of all, blaming in general is not acceptable. Then blaming the Jews for the foolishness of humanity is a crime and not acceptable. I speak on the authority of existence that this is not acceptable, and it will lead for more suffering. You know, the Nazis and Hitler, which is basically the godfather of BDS and the godfather of all those clowns attacking Israel and accusing Israel of things that it didn't do, basically doing the same strategy. It starts like a joke, you know, then the joke become true. And for those who live in the free world, they watch the media, they don't know the reality and all the dimensions of the paradox. You know, they see children dying, and they cannot connect the problem to the origins, where it all originated from. And therefore, they get emotional in Norway, in Sweden, in the UK, and the rest of the world, and they go on blaming Israel. Well, can you imagine if the Palestinians or Hamas or any other Arab country had the power that Israel has today? What would happen? Another Holocaust. But because existence gives Israel the power, because Israel has proven to be responsible and not abusing that power. This is why it's given to Israel. Israel maintains the stability of that region. Trust me, as a son of that culture, and as a person who came out of that darkness, if there was no Israel, Arab will kill Arab. They're already doing it. Muslim will kill Muslim. Sunni will kill Shi'i. Shi'i will kill Sunni. You know, this is the reality. Thousands, I would say 1,400 years at least of a conflict, Sunni Shi'i conflict, hundreds of thousands of people died. Muslims, it's a region full of hatred. And you know, they can't go on blaming Israel, that Israel is responsible for the hatred in the region. False. They live in the darkness of repression, and they have Israel as a common enemy. It appears from the outside that it unifies them, but it doesn't. It doesn't. And if Israel was not in the region, they would kill each other even more. Israel, I said this many times and I say it again and again and again, is not the problem in the Middle East. Israel, in my opinion, is the solution. Finally, I see many zeros there, means like I exceeded my time. Finally, as an American, I asked the President of the United States and his delegation to the Middle East, whoever is responsible, Kushner or others, not to propose any deal to the Middle East. The American taxpayers are not responsible for the situation in the Middle East. And generosity is given, not taken by the means of intimidation and threatening and the means of the sword. That's not acceptable. You know, when America or Americans decide to be generous, you know, those people need to realize that this is not a weakness. Unfortunately, they think, the Palestinian Authority and the others, they think they can manipulate the United States and intimidate Israel, the United States, and take more money. Every time they want money, they threaten the world with violence. They launch an intifada. This is over. You know, they can hit their head against the wall as long as they need, you know, until they realize that Israel is going nowhere. It's a reality. And the Jewish people who live in Israel, I don't care how it was established. You know, I am not a Zionist. I don't want to be one. But what I see a whole new generation, millions of people who are born in this land, in Israel, It's their birthright to be in Israel. Nobody can take that right away. They are not birth certificates. They are not numbers. They are not a race. They are humans, expressions of the divine, individuals, children of earth. And nobody can take that away. It's not a matter of negotiations. Israel is going nowhere. Wake up. So practically, as long as the Palestinian Authority put nationalism as priority above children, this kind of irresponsible leadership should never get a deal or a penny from the United States, from the European Union, or from anywhere. This is the way I see it. They need to choose between nationalism or children. No other way. Thank you very much. God bless you. And hopefully we'll see you later.